The couple times where I basically ran out of money and almost didn't make payroll, I've asked that question of, is this even worth it? Every time I've asked that question, I kind of go through the logical framework of what else am I going to do? I would not be a good employee. I don't want to work for someone else. I've been an entrepreneur my whole life. I would just start another business and I would face the same problems. To me, it's just a challenge.
RT Custer, welcome to the root of all success.
Hey, thank you so much for having me, Jason. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, man. Well, so you're in the watch business. And so after you spent 6 years battling one of the biggest watch conglomerates on the planet, and you won. Mm-hmm. What did that fight cost you? Not just in terms of money, but like, what did it cost you personally?
Well, I thought it would cost me more of my hair, so we'll see how that goes. It cost me. I'm going to be honest. It cost me a business partner. It almost cost me a life partner. It cost me obviously hundreds of thousands of dollars, literally, and all the years of my life. But to me, it was worth it because not only is it a good story, but like, I don't know, I stood up for myself. I stood up for the little guy. And in a David and Goliath story, I feel like the little guy doesn't always get to share his side of the story. And so, yeah, for me, it was totally worth those things that I lost or almost lost. And, to answer your question, a ton of stress.
So we don't know what company you own yet. We don't know why this big watch conglomerate did what they did. Could you give us a 2-minute flyover? And then once we have a context, then I can kind of dive into some questions about what's going on with you and your business. But who is the company that got sued? Who's the company that did the suing? What was the basis for their lawsuit? And then we know you won because I already told everybody that. But tell us a little bit about what happened leading up to that.
Yeah, so the lawsuit you're talking about is Hamilton v. Vortic. I run Vortic Watch Company here in Fort Collins, Colorado, and like Vortex and TikTok, a beautiful clash of old and new, we take antique American pocket watches and turn them into one-of-a-kind wristwatches. I started the company because I wanted to make a watch that was truly American-made, and we found these old pocket watches made 100 years ago by companies like Hamilton, who was in Pennsylvania in the early 1900s making pocket watches. And we turn those antique American pocket watches or little pieces of history into wristwatches, making almost entirely everything in the USA. And we got sued for trademark infringement and counterfeiting because if you see our product, a Vortic watch or a pocket watch turned into a wristwatch, it still says Hamilton or Elgin or Waltham or Illinois, the great American brand on the face of the watch. We call it the dial. Everything else on the outside is Vortic, but it's a true piece of history on the inside, and we don't change what it says on the face of the watch.
Okay, so they sued you for trademark infringement, et cetera. How did the judge or whoever, the jury, whatever, at the end of the day, rule in your favor? Would they say, hey, no, you can do this because X? What ended up giving you the victory?
Well, so in trademark infringement and the other thing was counterfeiting. Basically, for counterfeiting, I had to prove that we weren't making anything that had their name on it, which was fairly easy. I just had to show, this is exactly what we do. And then with trademark infringement, that's all about consumer confusion. So I had to prove that my customer was not confused, and they knew that this was an old pocket watch made by somebody like Hamilton 100 years ago, but now turned into a wristwatch currently today, remade or refurbished by Vortic. And really, I just had to tell our story. And that's what my attorney said. It's just like, hey, when you're up there, keep talking, tell your whole story. You never did anything wrong. We claimed that it was art. We claimed that we were recycling, it was reuse, upcycling, is what a lot of people call it. And we just had to give the judge enough context to kind of see the light there and make sure that she knew, in this case, there was no confusion. Everybody knew what they were buying. Plus, we were a small company really just being bullied by a big one.
Yeah. So now you started Vortic in 2014 with a business partner at the time, which it sounds like is you no longer, you lost the business partner along the way. You can tell that story if you'd like. But what about the idea that you and he had was the aha moment that went, ooh, we got something here. We can actually do this as a business.
Yeah, so I think the real light bulb moment for us was walking into a pawn shop and asking if they had old pocket watches, because we had the initial concepts of like, okay, if we're going to start a watch company, let's make it in America. And no one makes the movement or all the gears and springs that tell time inside a watch. Nobody makes that in America. That's a Chinese or a Swiss component at this point. And so we did a ton of research and we stumbled on the history of these old pocket watch companies that were around 100 years ago. And we walked into a pawn shop to say, hey, let's try to buy a pocket watch, take it apart, and figure out how they did it back then and go from there. And the person that owned this pawn shop happened to be a watchmaker and like had the whole history just kind of in his head and just knew all this stuff. And he was like, here, just take them, like nobody has any use for them. They're, they still work. They just need some love. And that's when the light bulb went off. It's like, oh, well, there's millions of them out there. We just have to figure out where to get them. And then we have to find people, watchmakers, that have the skill set to be able to restore them. And we don't actually have to make all the hard stuff. We can make the easier stuff like the case and the crown and the things on the outside. And that was really the light bulb moment of like, wow, we can actually achieve American made and make things in America. And we're like recycling, upcycling, reusing. It's just, it's a sustainable business. We're checking a ton of boxes from a marketing and a manufacturing standpoint. And that's where like, we might have a business here.
Interesting. So do you have one on right now?
I have one of our new watches. It's called Colorado Watch Company. It looks really similar to the Vortic Watch Company Military Edition. This one has the crown up at 12 o'clock here, which all of our Vortic watches have. I made this one basically, fast forward to today. This was 10 years ago when we started. We can only make about 400 pocket watches into wristwatches a year, like, basically one watch a day. That's kind of the capacity of the company for Vortic. And so about a year ago, we had the idea to start Colorado Watch Company to have a separate brand that we could make thousands of watches. And now fast forward to today, we can actually make some of those parts here, and we can make, or at least assemble, some of those movements here, and we can make watches at scale. So at this point, I run a manufacturing backbone to made in USA watch brands.
So you describe yourself as someone who struggles with focus but thrives on multiple projects. So how do you balance being a multifaceted entrepreneur without spreading yourself too thin?
Yeah, so it's very hard. And I don't know if it's ADHD. I don't know if it's, just the way I was raised, but I always have to have multiple things going on, whether it's multiple projects inside a business, or now I have multiple brands inside of my manufacturing business. But the best way I've found to kind of solve that is to just let myself play, let myself have fun, try new things. I tried running a marketing agency for a little while. That didn't work out. I tried helping my wife with a couple of her businesses. That didn't work out. It's difficult to play outside of kind of your niche. And so what I've decided over the last few years is like, I'm going to let myself play and have fun and explore in entrepreneurship, but in the niche of American made watches. And that way there's still some level of focus. I'm in the same lane, but I can have multiple brands that do different things. I can mentor my friends that are trying to make watches in America, and we can do that whole, I love to say, as the tide rises, all ships rise thing, which is multiple businesses at once, but still kind of in that same vein and having fun and not being too distracted.
Well, when you were going through the lawsuit with Hamilton, and wasn't that also part of Swatch Group?
Yeah, so Hamilton is a brand of the Swatch Group, which is 32 brands now and probably 8 billion in annual revenue.
Yeah, so Swatch, I mean, I don't know Hamilton. I've never heard of that before because I'm not a watch guy, but Swatch I know because I remember back when I was a kid in the 80s and 90s, Swatch watches were kind of a big thing. They're all rubber and plastic and things. But when you were in this legal battle with one of the world's largest watch companies, not the world's largest watch company, at any point did you consider walking away? Did you say I'm not doing this, or what was it that made you want to stay and not walk away?
Yeah, I mean, I was told a bunch of times by pretty much everyone I knew and loved that I should quit, that I should stop, that I should try to do something else. Um, I was given advice by multiple attorneys, some that were my attorney at the time, that said like, "Hey, there's just no way you can win." And so, yeah, I explored options several different times. I almost ran out of money one time. And really the biggest inflection point of the story was sometime in 2019. I was sitting in the parking lot of my workshop, about to walk back in after a trip to New York City. I went to New York City to meet with the Swatch Group, one of their attorneys, and they no showed the judge. Like, we were supposed to meet them and a federal judge, and they just no showed the meeting. And the attorney that I had at that time was just like, okay, they clearly don't care about you. They don't care about this process. They're just here to crush you. And he recommended that I give up. So I sat in my parking lot before I was walking in to tell my business partner what happened and kind of discuss this with the team and figure out what to do next. And at the advice of several of my very close friends, I Googled best Colorado bankruptcy attorney. And that was the first time I basically started to try to give up.
Mm. Did you talk to any attorneys about that?
Well, so the first person I talked to, I just, picked up and dialed. And the first person I talked to, he said, I have good news and bad news. The bad news is I'm not that type of bankruptcy attorney. I'm the type of bankruptcy attorney that sues big companies when they falsely, file for bankruptcy and try to get around the law. But he said the good news is my partner in the law firm is an expert in trademark law. And so I want to help because you sound like you're kind of at the end of the line here, and I'd love to try to help. And his name was Rob Lance, and he's the one that took me from that point of basically giving up to working for free for almost a year to save the company and going to federal court with me in 2020. And, like you said, long story short, winning the lawsuit. So I asked for help, and, the universe shined down brightly on me that day and gave me everything.
Wow. How cool is that you, at the moment of you were going to give up, that's when you got the answer on how to make it through.
Yeah, that's it. I firmly believe in someone's out there looking down at me and helping. I believe in karma. I believe in doing the right thing. And I put in a lot of effort and a lot of work and tried really hard. And someone that day said, "Hey, I know it feels like you should give up, but maybe there's one last thing here."
Entrepreneurship is often romanticized, and but there is a dark side to it, and there's a lot of dark moments. I can share similar experiences that you might have had emotionally that day that you made that phone call and you were googling those attorneys. Have you ever hit a moment where you question, is this even worth it?
Yeah, I mean that was a big one. The couple times where I basically ran out of money and almost didn't make payroll. I've asked that question of the universe, of myself, of my team, like, is this even worth it? And every time I've asked that question, I kind of go through the logical framework of what else am I going to do? And I would not be a good employee. I don't want to work for someone else. I've been an entrepreneur my whole life. And I would just start another business and I would face the same problems. And so to me, it's just a challenge. And I've always, knock on wood, solved those challenges. Sometimes it's been hard, like early on, there was one day where I sold my car to make payroll. And I showed up in a brand new car that I leased, but I, cashed out of the car that I owned, and then was just paying a small monthly payment on a lease now. So I got some cash and I made payroll. I don't know. Yeah, I think that's just entrepreneurship. And to your point, sometimes there's low points, and the people that are still here after 10 years are the people that don't let that get to them and don't let that, crush them.
Well, you've credited your success to the people around you. How do you build that supportive team who supports your vision, but also challenges you to grow?
Yeah. So number one is having a really, really in-depth interview process and recruiting process. I ask a lot of questions that, if you work in HR, you probably say like, hey, you're not really supposed to ask questions like that. I don't care. I want to know exactly who you are and if we're going to get along and if you're going to fit in with the team. Like I'm asking questions right now of potential video editors where I'm just like, okay, tell me how this phrase makes you feel. Done is better than perfect. And half of those people are like, oh my God, that makes me feel awful. I'm a creative person. Like that's an awful conversation. I'm just like, okay, well, maybe job isn't right for you because I need to move fast. I need to move really fast. I'm gonna put a lot of pressure on you. I'm good with B-level content. I don't need A-level content if it's going to take you a month to produce. And I think all of that dives back into being able and willing to have hard conversations. And so I start with those hard conversations from the interview process all the way to today when I have somebody like my assistant who's worked for me for 3 years. Periodically, we have to have a hard conversation of just like, hey, this isn't working. This feeling that we both have today isn't working. We're here to have fun. Like, yeah, we're making money, but like, if it isn't fun, let's go do something else. And so, yeah, just being willing to recognize when you have to have one of those conversations and then dive and head in.
All right, before we continue, I want to talk about our sponsor for today's episode. And he just mentioned video editing. So I want to talk about what it's like to use video to do sales outreach. I want to thank our sponsor for today's episode, Dubb. That's D-U-B-B. If you haven't used Dubb or looked into it, you're really missing out because it is a wonderful process to use Dubb to design and develop targeted sales video messages that you can send out. I know lots of people use other products to do screen recordings, etc. Dubb does that too. And it has a full set of array of tools where you can set up assets and personalize things where when somebody watches your email, it automatically goes, or watches your video, it automatically goes to the next thing that you want them to see. There's calls to action you can put in it. Dubb is phenomenal. If you're in sales and you want to bring the personal back to personalized selling, go check them out and get a discount at my link, therealjasonduncan.com/Dubb, therealjasonduncan.com/Dubb, and that's spelled D-U-B-B. So RT, you're working on your book right now, American Dreamers, the David versus Goliath story, defending the right to upcycle. And you're doing it, I think, first as a YouTube docuseries, and then you're working with some writers and even AI to help you produce this book. Why do you want to write it, and what's it going to be about?
Yeah, honestly, it's just documenting the story of the lawsuit that we talked about, and I think the why for me is just that fact that most of the Davids in a David and Goliath story don't get to share their side of the story. Either the legal process prevents them from sharing all the ins and outs because they lost, or they have to sign, things that they say they can't talk about these things, or they lose, the lawsuit. And so that side of the story never gets told. And so I just think there's a lot of entrepreneurs out there that either have been sued and can't talk about it or don't want to talk about it, or entrepreneurs that like might get sued. And it's like, if you can pick one thing out of my story that can help you either not get sued or what to do if you do, I'd love to be able to help just like one person with that. And I know I've helped a lot of people just from, having this story on a few podcasts and people saying like, hey, I actually got sued too. And I can't talk about it, or I don't talk about it, or I didn't know people talked about it like that. Like, you make it just sound like normal life. And so I think entrepreneurship is really lonely, and it can be just in a silo. And so I think having these conversations and talking about it is really beneficial. And that's really what I want to accomplish.
Yeah, I asked you at the top of the show a little bit about what this thing cost you, and you alluded to hundreds of thousands of dollars, and you talked about the emotional toll and the friendship toll and that it cost you. Is part of the book that you're writing going to actually dive into this is how much it costs to go through this process? And the reason I asked this question, RT, is that a lot of entrepreneurs listening to the show are on the cusp of having to deal with crap that you're dealing with. Mm-hmm. And they don't know what that looks like financially. So I believe that stories like yours, if you're willing to share, are going to be helpful, because they're going to go, oh, well, yeah, it was X number of thousands of dollars. I don't have that. But if I know that I'm going into it and that's the expectation, okay, I'm up for that type of challenge. Or they may have in mind that it's going to be X when it's really only Y. So is that something you're going to share in the book?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm also going to share things I would have done differently, like getting better insurance from the beginning, because my insurance did not cover this type of lawsuit. And some people's insurance, if you spend, another $100 or $200 a month on insurance, you might actually have coverage for some of the things that I did not have coverage for. And it would cost you $0 actually to, or a deductible to have an attorney come in and help you with this kind of stuff. And so it's all about, you don't know what you don't know. And so if I can uncover some of that stuff and just do it transparently, that's really, to me, the point. And in general, for marketing for my company and all the stuff we do, including the book and all the stuff I'm working on, I just prefer the theory of document, don't create. I'm not telling you a made up story. I'm not doing any kind of like big marketing efforts. I'm just saying, hey, here's what I went through. Here's what I'm doing. We're cutting metal to make watches in Fort Collins, Colorado. And if you think that's cool, then come along on the journey. I'm going to keep documenting it, and you can, see exactly who we are and what we do.
Well, I know that you're deeply invested in preserving American history through watchmaking. And I wonder if you have a take on manufacturing here in the U.S. I know that President Trump, who just came in the office earlier this year, seems to be also deeply invested in the fact that, hey, we want to bring manufacturing back to the U.S. So, such these doing tariffs and that type of thing. I'm not asking a political question. I'm just asking about from a manufacturing standpoint. Do you think we've lost manufacturing in America, or is there a chance it's coming back?
So it is coming back, definitely. Right now, there has never been a better time to make something in the United States, and there has never been more eyeballs on Made in USA and support of it. You can see that. I mean, there's a news story basically every day, whether it's something from those political changes that happened or just companies like Apple saying, hey, we're investing hundreds of billions of dollars in American infrastructure and American jobs. It seems like there's a spotlight on Made in USA and the why behind it. But the thing that I think gets overlooked that I try to focus on is the people actually doing the work with their hands. And I like, people like Mike Rowe and the Mike Rowe Works Foundation, where he talks about the skilled trades. And it's all about education, where it's like, hey, you can go to school for 2 years and be a plumber or an electrician or a watchmaker and make just as much as someone like me who went to school for 4 years and got an engineering degree. And all you have to do is work with your hands. And also, you can be an entrepreneur in one of those fields and make lots more than anyone else. And so it's just an unknown. I don't think our kids from the beginning realize that it's cool to work with your hands and do those kind of things. And so those are the things that I like to talk about a lot, is like, let's dirty jobs it. Let's go and see what it's like to be a watchmaker and to do a skilled trade. And again, that's why I like to turn the camera around to just showcase the people behind this wall next to me actually making the watches.
So where do you see yourself in 10 years? Are you still going to be in watches, or is there another industry that you see yourself getting into?
So 10 years from now, I hope to be more just a business owner than a business manager. And I like the idea of having a group of brands, kind of like the Swatch Group. It's kind of ironic that that's what I want to build, the company that sued me. But I like the idea of having a group or a coalition of companies that I run that are all making things in America. I think it can still all be watches. I think there can be a huge company that's all different brands making watches, but maybe there's offshoots where we're making leather goods and we're making, other supporting industries, and we own some of those verticals. But I would love to be in kind of that upper corporate management, like having a fund, that is financially supporting a bunch of different brands. That's the kind of stuff I see myself doing, either that or very similar, like angel investing, and helping people the way that my investors and my advisors have helped me get to where I am.
Well, this is a shameless plug, but since you said it, I'm gonna mention it. I run a mastermind for entrepreneurs where we help you go from owner operator to owner manager to owner investor. So cool. If you and I want to talk about that later, we can do that. But let me ask you this: what is your out of the success that you've had as an entrepreneur, a watchmaker, a business owner, and a lawsuit winner, what do you believe is your one key that has unlocked success for you more than anything else?
The thing that really changed the game for me during the lawsuit and then since, because I just kind of unlocked this and realized it, was getting over any ego that I have around asking for help and just asking for help. Sometimes asking for help is looking at your phone and Googling best Colorado bankruptcy attorney and asking for help from Google or the universe or God or whoever you want to you say, created the help that day. And sometimes it's going into, I've been in a bunch of masterminds. I have business coaches and people that I've worked with. It's, I've worked with my dad for years as an advisor, just like, hey, have you ever seen this? Or how do I do this? It's asking my friends or just random people on the street. It's just like, hey, look, you're a business owner. Have you seen this? Have you done this before? Like, I think for the first part of my entrepreneurial career, I let ego get in the way and I just kind of put my head down and said like, I'll figure it out, or I can do this myself. I don't need to ask that question, or that's a dumb question. And now I'm just like, I ask questions all day, every day of everyone I meet. And I'm just like, it's gone. And I'm just like, I need help. So here I am, please help me. And people love to help. That's what I found is like, it's such a great give and take. And I really do believe that as the tide rises, all ships rise. And I think I just want to surround myself with more people that believe the same thing.
How do you define the word success?
I like thinking about success as part of my definition of the American dream. Somebody asked me the other day, like, how are you? And I was just like, well, I'm living the dream on paper. I own a house, I own a commercial building, I own a 7-figure business. I can pay myself. I have probably a dozen employees. Like, yes, I feel successful most of the time. Because that's most people's definition of success. But my definition of success is, I think, the next layer of that, which is being able to give that to other people. So I feel successful when my employees walk in and they ask for a W-2 so they can go buy a house. I feel successful when one of my employees, parks in the parking lot with a brand new car. They are trusting their entire financial world to me and the business that I built. That makes me feel successful when things like that happen. And it's also just really cool.
Yeah. So by that definition, do you consider yourself successful?
No, I think most people would consider me very successful. And yes, I check all the boxes for the dream and like, sure. Like I have done a lot of those things. But I will always consistently every day move the goal line just one step ahead, because that's just who I am. And I've accepted that. And I always want something more. I always want something different. And again, if that wasn't fun, I would stop, but it's still fun.
So now, if you put your advisor hat on, you're going to give some advice to an entrepreneur who's listening to the show. What is the best piece of advice you could give an entrepreneur?
Every question that pops into your head, ask it. Ask it of someone you know, someone you love, Google, ChatGPT. Don't let a question just sit in your head unanswered. You have to stay curious. And I think the world beats curiosity out of us from when we're little kids. And that's really where those questions come from, is curiosity. And if you are not continuously curious and you do not continuously explore your industry and your job and your employees and your the world around you, you're not going to continuously innovate and you're not going to continuously grow.
Favorite antique watch you've ever restored?
Well, so in general, my favorite product that we make, and I think everyone's favorite product, is called the Military Edition. And it's a pocket watch made by Hamilton, ironically, made in World War II. And it was called the Master Navigator's Watch. And it was used by the navigator on a B-17 or similar aircraft during World War II to figure out where they were in the sky and make sure we were bombing the Nazis and not somebody else. And so that is definitely the coolest pocket watch we've ever turned into a wristwatch. And we do it just once a year on Veterans Day. We call it the military edition, and we make 50 of them a year, just one day a year.
Wow. What's the most unexpected place you've ever found a vintage pocket watch?
Gosh, probably like just a random thrift shop in Pennsylvania when I was home visiting my family. They had everything. And you expect to find pocket watches at pawn shops and jewelry stores and things like that. But this thrift shop had a little like jewelry case, and they had a bunch of pocket watches in there. And the guy said they've been in there for years. Nobody looks at them. Nobody cares. And I was like, I'll take all of them. And he was like, oh my God, thank God, and it went to a charity, it went to a good cause. And so I was like, oh, this is perfect. And if they're just sitting there, I'm sure I'll find a home for them. And we did.
What's one business mistake you'll never make again?
Getting into a business partnership without fully knowing the human that's on the other side of the table.
We could probably talk a whole nother half hour on that issue.
I sure could.
But we won't. We won't do that.
Yeah.
Last question, man. If you could send a message back to yourself in 2014, what would you tell yourself? That was the year you started Vortic.
Oh, man. It's a long story, and it depends on how spiritual you want to get. But after I lost my mom in 2020, she came and spoke to me through my son, and she said 2 words. She said, "It's okay." And I would say that. I would say, "It's okay." And it would confuse the shit out of me. But as I lived that next 10 years, and as those things happened, because it did when I got that message from my mom, it confused the shit out of me. But now everything, I'm just like, it's okay. and that means a lot to me. And so, yeah, that's what I would say. And I really like, I don't know, I like riddles like that too. It's like, let's unpack this together, and let's let the universe tell us what we're supposed to do. And the journey is the journey, and it'll all be okay.
All right. So tell people how to get in touch with you and your companies.
Yeah. So for me, I'm on Instagram and LinkedIn, RT Custer without the periods, like Robert Thomas Custer, Custer, on those 2 platforms. And then you can also get in touch with us, vorticwatches.com, V as in Victor, ORTIC, watches.com, and Vortic Watches on all the other platforms.
Yeah. Well, RT, thank you so much for sharing your story. Congratulations on your victory over the Swatch Group. And congratulations on just the American dream of building something here in the United States and restoring these old things. We were talking pre-show that my grandfather gave me a pocket watch a long time ago, and I don't use it. And I thought it was on the shelf behind me. It's not. Thought it was in my sock drawer. It's not there. I don't know where it is. It's probably in a box. But I love the idea that you're taking these old things and bringing them back to life. So congratulations on all your success. And thank you so much for being the guest on the show today.
Thank you for having me.
Well, there you have it. Another story of success. We've talked with several entrepreneurs on this show over the past 6 months who've been either on the brink of bankruptcy or went through bankruptcy, or other similar terrible things have happened. And the theme that we're continuing to see is, as he said, is it's okay. You're going to make it. Even if you get sued, even if you go bankrupt, it's going to be all right. We're going to be okay. Now, let's all say that we don't want to do that. We don't want to go through those things, but it's going to be okay. So thank you for listening to this show and being encouraged by guests like RT Custer and Vortic Watches and the story that he shared today. Go check him out, connect with them, and make sure that you leave a review on this show. If you thought this episode was helpful, please leave a review. It very, very much helps us as a podcast so that we can get in front of more people. So thank you for doing that. And, tune in again next week. I'm going to be talking with yet another very successful person about his or her journey to success. And as always, until then, I am the real Jason Duncan, and Jesus is King.
Attention business owners. Attention business owners. Feeling burnout from running your business? Uncertain if you're nearing burnout? Take our free 10-question business burnout test at businessburnouttest.com to discover where you stand. With just 10 quick questions, you'll learn how to immediately begin making changes to regain freedom and success. Cut your daily operations time in half. Improve your quality of life and prepare your business for your future exit without losing revenue or profit. Visit businessburnouttest.com now and take the test. Thank you for listening to another edition of The Root of All Success with the real Jason Duncan. If you've enjoyed this week's episode, visit therootofallsuccess.com to access the show notes and other helpful resources. Follow Jason on social media at The Real Jason Duncan. See you again next time here on The Root of All Success.